During his time as Treasurer and later as Prime Minister, Paul Keating was known for his love of the finer things in life. One of those was the love of Mr Keating's family car, a top-of-the-line 1972 model Mercedes-Benz. This is the car he would drive around on his own time, taking the family on holidays and other personal trips. After Paul Keating lost the 1996 election, he gifted the car to his personal Commcar driver, the late Jimmy Warner from Queanbeyan. The car has remained in Jimmy's family's possession ever since, but it's now up for auction. To take us through the history of the car itself and the significance to Jimmy's family and to Mr Keating, I caught up with the current owner of the car, Jimmy Warner's nephew, Simon. Simon Warner, thanks for joining us. Let's start, if you can give us a sense of your uncle Jimmy. How did he get to know Paul Keating?
Well, my uncle was a Commonwealth car driver, and when Keating got into as Treasurer in 1983 under Labor, he picked him up at Old Parliament House, and that's how they got to. He picked him up, and he was his driver for 13 years.
Two very different people, though, weren't they? Jimmy, the boy from Queanbeyan, loved to punt.
Yes, yes.
Loves his sport.
Yep.
Keating, as we know, had an eye for the finer things, French antiques, clocks, and obviously this beautiful car behind us.
Yeah. Yeah, different, chalk and cheese. They had a love for classical music, but Jimmy was a sort of, laconic, easygoing, They're like chalk and cheese in some ways, but obviously they had a great friendship, and it continued right through.
Tell us how, if we go way back, how did Paul Keating get a hold of this? It's a 1972 Mercedes S-Class, the top of the line in 1972, but it was in the 80s when Paul Keating acquired this car. Tell us how.
Well, it's a classic story. Jimmy, they were down in Melbourne, and Jimmy was driving him around, and this Mercedes-Benz passed them. And Keating said to Jimmy, "Oh, chase that car." And Michael said, "No, I'm not chasing the car." So they did, and they pulled the guy over, and the guy must have been in shock. I mean, you've got the Treasurer and my uncle, who's a large, sort of biggish sort of guy, and they were talking, and Mr Keating bought the car virtually on the spot.
We said they had an affinity, but they were a bit different as well.
Yeah, they were, yeah. I think what set the tone was when he first picked him up as Treasurer, and they're driving back, he's driving Mr Keating back home, and Mr Keating's giving him directions. And Jimmy said to him, "Look, you worry about the economy, let me do the driving." But it was in more colourful words than that. And that set the tone, So that sort of set the tone, and Mr Keating must have thought, "Oh gosh,
Well, he wasn't averse to using a bit of colourful language himself.
That's right, Coon. He wasn't at all.
Tell us another story about when Jimmy was his Commcar driver, because I believe there was also an episode when there was an event at Parliament House.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, and there's an event at Parliament House, but Mr Keating was Prime Minister then, and Jimmy was there waiting. As you did in those days, you had to wait, and you probably still do now. You had to wait for your boss basically to finish his. It was an event, and there was food and there was drink and whatever. And so Jimmy got a bit bored, and he had a few drinks. And then when Mr Keating went to find the driver, well, the driver had too many to drink. So Mr Keating drove himself home with my uncle in the passenger seat back to the lodge.
So the Commcar driver got driven by the then Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, the fact that they were mates probably made that a bit easier too.
Made it a lot easier.
Oh wow, beautiful. Love that.
What do you think, Kieran?
Love that smell.
Yeah, the leather smell, original leather seats and the wood grain. It's just a great smell.
Isn't it?
It sticks with the car.
Yeah, and so how did Jimmy end up getting the car from Mr Keating?
Well, when Mr Keating lost the Prime Ministership in '96, he had two Mercs, the Sports and this one. And as he just gave it to him as a gift, just as a farewell sort of gratitude. Yeah, just gave it to him.
Yeah, that's amazing. But the gratitude from Paul Keating, it was. I mean, this is a beautiful car, 50 years old.
Yeah.
But it was more than just the car, wasn't it?
Yes,
it was ongoing support.
Ongoing, it was. Ongoing support for the car. Like it needed a paint job, and Jimmy got it done in Queanbeyan, and Mr Keating paid for it. He paid for the major services on the car, which aren't cheap for a Merc, and any other issues, he paid for them.
I think the thing that, beyond this beautiful car that shows you the level of the connection between the Commcar driver, Jimmy, And Mr. Keating he gave a eulogy, didn't he?
Yes, yes. When Michael passed away in 2016, Mr. Keating came up. He was at the hospital, obviously, and they, would have shut the door, and Jimmy would have had him in there. And we didn't know much about it. Oh, we obviously visited Jimmy at the hospital, but we didn't know much about it. And they did the eulogy, and we sort of found out 2 days before the funeral that Mr. Keating was going to do the eulogy.
So, given that the car's been a big part of your family and so on, it must be hard to. I know you want to find a new owner for it now, but it must be hard to do that.
With a heavy heart, Kieran, for sure. I mean, I spoke to my cousin Annie, who's Jimmy's daughter, and I told her, and and she notified Mr. Keating, and he said he didn't want it back, and I just needed some sort of closure on it, and Annie said to me, look, Dad would have said, just get rid of the bloody car, Simon, will you? And that made me feel a lot better. But with a heavy heart, I'm selling it. Yeah, moving it on to someone else who's going to love it as much as we did.
Simon Warner, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to talk, and for sharing your personal and family story. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kieran.